Florida Governor Ron DeSantis is within single digits of former President Donald Trump in a new national GOP primary survey. A sample of Republican and Republican-leaning respondents to a Yahoo News and YouGov poll were asked, who would you rather see as the Republican nominee for president in 2024? And given a choice between Trump and DeSantis, among registered voters, 45% prefer Trump, while 36% prefer DeSantis. It's a 9-point difference that normally might not seem very close, but for Trump in a reputable Republican primary poll, it's the closest anyone has ever gotten yet. Trump weighed in on a possible 2024 run in a recent interview. Let's take a look at that.
Are Melania and Barron on board with a possible run again in 2.5 years?
Well, they love our country and they hate to see what's happening. So at the right time, I'll be saying what I want to do. But they do. They love our country. Both. Barron's a young man.
Yep.
And Melania is a first lady who is really loved.
Yes.
I will say that. I see the signs. We love our first lady. But they love our country. So I think they'll do what has to be done if we decide to go that way.
Could you envision a world, sir, where there is a Trump-DeSantis ticket in 2024?
Well, I get along with him. I was very responsible for his success because I endorsed him and he went up like a rocket ship, just like I endorsed Mary Miller the other day, who supposedly was not going to win and she won.
She won.
Just like Darren Bailey is doing great. He just won.
Yep.
I think he's going to beat Pritzker, one of the worst governors of the country.
What an entertaining guy. Joe Rogan is also on the DeSantis 2024 train, saying the governor would work as a good president and that what he's done for Florida has been admirable. Joining us to discuss are Democratic strategist Colin Rogero and cultural editor at the Federalist, as well as co-host of Rising Fridays, Emily Jashinsky. Thank you both for being here.
Good morning. Thank you for playing that clip.
Good morning. Yeah, that was fun.
A part of me, I'm not saying that I missed him, but I have, my brain is not used to the pattern of hearing his very particular cadence and way of speaking. And it was like just a little jolt to my system, like, oh yeah, Donald Trump. Emily, I want to go to you. I want to go to you first and ask you, this poll was taken recently. How much do you think, if any, effect the recent revelations in these 1-6 hearings will have on these poll numbers? Is it going to cause Republicans to think, hey, I might not care that much about this, but, here's Ron DeSantis as a relatively clean slate. Let's just move past all of this Trump mishigas.
I actually think that's a really good point, and I hadn't thought of it that way because I do generally believe there's exasperation with some people in the Republican base. Just with the drama, that definitely exists. Now, the separate question of, I don't think the January 6 hearings is turning the Republican base, the kind of people that would vote in primaries against Trump. And that wasn't your question, but just to clarify, I don't think that that's happening. But I do think your question gets at something really interesting, which is that if Ron DeSantis is Trump without the baggage, as he's sort of been considered or pitched by people on the right and even some people in the media, then does the January 6th hearing, the ongoing sort of drama over Trump, boost DeSantis? I think that is legitimately a very good question.
Colin, what do you think? How are Democrats and Democratic strategists looking at this? Because I think a lot of Republican strategists think DeSantis would be a more appealing candidate to go up against Biden. I think there's been some support for that in the polling, that Trump would have a harder to. Obviously, Trump was defeated by Biden once. So are Democrats looking at this hoping that DeSantis' star does not rise, or are they so, horrified at the prospect of even having a chance of Trump again that they'd rather it be DeSantis anyway?
I think Democrats are more focused on housekeeping right now, and rightfully so. But here's what I will say about DeSantis. I think people on a national level don't know that much about him. I'm from Florida. I do a ton of work in Florida. DeSantis in a lot of these swing districts, even in the state of Florida, is not above water in his approvals, right? I think what that national poll of registered voters reflects is what I'm seeing in polls other places. And Emily hit on some of it, right? Maybe not in the Republican primary, but as a general voter sentiment. People are really sick and tired of the drama, and they're sick and tired of the polarization. And I'm seeing in polling questions where people are responding to that more than things that they would normally respond to, and typical kind of polling questions that people hold in high regard. They're sick of drama and they want people to just get some stuff done. Now, what has not been revealed about Ron DeSantis is Ron DeSantis has done a lot of the same things that motivated Democratic voters, in addition to alienating some large corporations like Disney. And I don't think that, I think he's a better opponent for a Democrat in 2024 than Trump, but nobody's taken Ron DeSantis apart yet. And that will absolutely happen. And he's got a lot of the same problems, culturally speaking. He restricted rights to vote, right? He played out this critical race theory in a major way. He's got the Don't Say Gay bill. He took on Disney. And there's a lot of other things that have happened on a state level that nobody's aware of nationally that will really damage him when he moves forward if voters are looking for somebody who's not so damn polarizing, which I think they are.
But Colin, isn't it, with the Trump stuff, this is what's been so frustrating for me as a leftist. It's like there's so much substantive stuff to criticize about Trump. But the thing that captures the public imagination, and we're seeing this with the 1-6 stuff, is the, oh my gosh, he took the wheel. Jesus take the wheel. Like that is the image in everybody's mind. It's the ketchup dripping down the wall. I saw a Drake Instagram making a little rap out of the drip down the wall. Like that's what people are talking about. So to the extent that Ron DeSantis is just a little bit more straight and narrow, less carnival barker kind of entertainment guy presentation, is there a chance that he just kind of slips under the radar in the way that a lot of Republicans, most Republicans until Trump did, and so we have this kind of tee up between two regular guys, and it's purely about policy and not so much about vibes. And if so, does that make it a harder time for Biden or potentially a challenger?
Yeah, I don't necessarily think so. I think we have to kind of firmly accept that in politics today, this is personality driven when you're talking about the presidential race. And, we're in the TMZ of politics. So the carnival barker thing has its own appeal as a showman, right? And Americans kind of want that showman style of person. People who run under the radar with great policy often don't do that well, even in Democratic primaries. Elizabeth Warren might have had the best policies there are, and most well thought out, and she didn't do that well. And so I think there's some of that. But I think what we also have to imagine, there's a near-term reference here, right? Like, the Tea Party was hot in 2010. They were hot. And by 2014, everybody hated that stuff and didn't want to be anywhere near it. And I've often said there's nothing kind of sadder than a politician out of power trying to hold on to that same power and swag. And Donald Trump's is waning by the day. He's under 50% in his endorsements, and he's playing the endorsement game, which was a dumb thing for him to do in the first place. And the shine is wearing off. And in a general election, this is where the 1-6 stuff is actually going to hurt it, because it's pretty egregious, right? And yeah, people are responding to the dumb stuff like throwing plates, but it's exemplary of a behavior pattern that people don't want in a leader.
Well, we wanted to comment on some other political electoral developments going on. So on Tuesday's primaries and runoffs saw the downfall of at least 3 House incumbents and the limits of top Democrats and Republicans to sway the results of key primary races. In Colorado, more moderate Republicans beat candidates who presented themselves as allies with Trump. However, then Trump-endorsed candidates were victorious in Illinois. Also, establishment Democrats in New York were victorious over progressive challengers, according to Hill reporting. So, Emily, I think it's still hard to tell. I'm curious for your take, how much you need Trump to win. Obviously, Trump's endorsement has been a factor in, I think, probably the Ohio Republican Senate primary for sure, the Mandel-Vance race, maybe arguably the Dr. Oz race. And then other places, candidates who have not courted Trump aggressively have won. So what is I think we're still trying to figure out how much the Trump factor matters, and it's not quite clear yet, but maybe the fever is breaking a little bit. I don't know. What do you think?
It's hard to say, because in the past of an endorsement, and actually still in every other endorsement except for Trump, maybe, it signifies that you are, perhaps a purist, right? So like when Colin was talking about the Tea Party races, if a candidate got Sarah Palin or Ted Cruz or Marco Rubio's endorsement at a certain point in time, it meant this big figurehead sees them as a member of this sort of wing of the ideology. And it was sort of that stamp of approval. It was that wing's stamp of approval. And, if Bernie Sanders endorses someone, this is a true progressive. That's sort of what you can think of. And with Trump, that's just not the case, because if you look at Dr. Oz, he was endorsing Dr. Oz explicitly as somebody who would be able to win the general election. I think that was a miscalculation, but that was the purpose behind his endorsement of Dr. Oz. And so what happens is the Trump endorsement becomes one of many, many variables in these local races, in these state-based races, where all kinds of different things are figuring into and factoring into voters' decisions. And so it's less of an ideological stamp, because he's sort of intentionally made it something where he's trying to mint winners and Trump allies, as opposed to making some sort of statement about people's platforms and ideology. So I think it just turns out to be hyper local in a lot of these cases, and it influences it certainly in Ohio, probably in Arizona, definitely in Pennsylvania. But other times I think local factors will take precedent, and voters sort of make up their minds based on all kinds of different things.
Yeah, and to the point I think you were making earlier, Colin, in terms of the substance, a lot of people do like Ron DeSantis for doing the same things that, Donald Trump was known to do. And so the idea of there being kind of one true Scotsman on the right, there's a couple of Scotsmen that are pretty true. Whereas on the left, outside of Bernie, you mentioned Elizabeth Warren earlier, even within the left, there's a lot of fractions over the Bernie camp versus the Warren camp that came out of the primary. Elizabeth Warren making those accusations about Bernie Sanders not believing a woman could be president in the final stretch there. And of course, even before that, really struggled to get voters of color to vote for her, and famously did pretty poorly in her home state, coming in third place. So there are still tensions over that in a way that makes, I think, Bernie's endorsement ring a lot more faithfully than perhaps on the right, where there are a lot of options. You got your Marjorie Taylor Greens. There's a lot to choose from over there. So I appreciate both of you joining us today.
Thanks.
Absolutely. Always a pleasure.
We'll have more Rising for you after this.